Okay, I have what could be some optimistic news for you. We talked optimistic vaccine news. Now let's talk about therapeutics. This may be optimistic, and you'll see why in a moment. Remdesivir is one of the drugs that I told you about 6 weeks ago as a candidate for treating coronavirus. And there are some very good results that have been summarized in an actual RCT, randomly controlled trial with a placebo. And I want to walk through it with you in detail. I'll tell you all the good things first, then I'll tell you why there is still some skepticism that is warranted here. 6 weeks ago, I told you about a number of drugs that were being tested. Of course, there was Donald Trump's darling chloroquine. That was one. Recent results on those tests, not good. Remdesivir from Gilead Sciences is another one. Favipiravir, also known as Avigan, is being tested. There's a combination of two HIV drugs being tested. There's a long list. The Remdesivir trial has just been one Remdesivir trial has just been done, and it's been done correctly. And this will help us to illustrate the difference between a proper trial and one that is not quite so good. Donald Trump, you might remember, praised the trial of chloroquine because it worked really well, he said. Now, that had a sample size of under 40 people, very, very small sample size. There was no control group, there was no placebo group, and it was not randomized. Those are problems. Now, momentarily, I'm going to explain to you why each of those things matter. We have a new study called Adaptive COVID-19 Treatment Trial, or ACT. It was randomized, and it also had a placebo group. So here's what this test found. First of all, it had 1,063 patients, good sample size, 38 people in the other chloroquine trial, not good. Number two, it was randomized. This is so important because if you don't randomize who gets the treatment versus who gets the placebo versus who's in the control group, you could, on purpose or, right, depending on what you want to attribute, malice or ignorance or just bias, you could on purpose or accidentally test the drug on the patients that are more likely to survive anyway, and then you get very skewed results. So randomization is very, very important. What was being tested was as the variable was how long does it take to recover from the virus. And what this test found is that those getting remdesivir recovered 31% faster than those given a placebo. Now, this is why the placebo is so important. If you don't have a placebo group, any improvement from the drug could be because of placebo. You want to be able to rule out placebo. So to properly do this, you give some people the drug, you give some people a placebo, and you compare the results, and people shouldn't know, of course, whether they're getting the placebo or the real drug. Very good, that was done. So these parameters, 1,063 patients, 31% better than placebo, this gives a p-value of under 0.001. Very important. What the hell am I talking about? What is a p-value? This is not trivial. The p-value tells you whether the results are scientifically significant or whether they could be the result of mere chance. The lower the p-value, the more likely that our results actually reflect the inputs and they're not just a coincidence. Let me give you an example of a test I could do, which would have a very high p-value, and you'll very quickly understand what I mean by coincidence. Imagine that you have a normal two-sided coin. It's got heads and it's got tails. There are two possible outcomes, heads or tails. If the coin is flipped fairly, meaning I'm not kind of like dropping it so I get heads every time, you understand. The more times I flip a fair two-sided coin, we would imagine I would roughly get closer and closer to 50% heads and 50% tails. Imagine that I got results after flipping the coin 4 times, where all 4 times I got heads, and it's a fair coin, okay? The p-value for that study would be very, very high. And what that would tell us is it could be coincidence. The fact that you flipped a fair coin 4 times and got heads 4 times in a row would have a high p-value because it could just be chance and not representative of what would be the long-term expectation, which is you only get heads half the time and you get tails half the time. So you would be very wrong if, based on getting heads 4 times, you made a big bet that it would always be heads. That means there's a very high p-value there. In the study on remdesivir, we have a very low p-value. It's less than 0.001. What that tells us is that it is incredibly unlikely that the patients who did better on the drug versus the placebo did better only by chance. Now, in addition to the quicker recovery, 31% faster recovery for people having remdesivir versus placebo, the mortality rate was 8% for those who received remdesivir and 11.6% for those who received the placebo. Now, the p-value there is 0.059. It's basically 0.06. In textbooks, we are told a p-value greater than 0.05 means that the results are not statistically significant. So the idea here is people who recover seem to recover more quickly because of the drug, and that's statistically significant. It's less clear whether the drug helps people survive who otherwise wouldn't. But here's the thing about the 0.05, 0.06 p-value. There's nothing hard and fast about 0.049 is significant and 0.051 is not. It's not a magical spot. And there can be a difference between statistically significant and clinically significant. So in either case, we can speculate, and this is mere speculation, but it seems reasonable. We could imagine this trial of 1,000 people was of people already quite ill. What we would want to see is if you give the drug earlier, does it increase survivability to a greater degree? Now, that's all the good news. Take everything I just told you and realize it may not be true. What I mean by that is the following. We don't actually have the data from the study yet. What we have is a summary of data done by doctors. It has happened in the past that the summary sometimes, you go and you look at the data and you say, the summary is wrong. This is not actually what the data show. If the data have been summarized accurately, then we do have something here to look at. Now, in the meantime, there's been a different study of remdesivir with only a couple of hundred people. It was double-blind placebo, and it shows no benefits from remdesivir. So we still need more study. If this study is accurately representing the data, that's very good. Now, one other note on these tests. One thing that gets difficult when you do these tests, when you have an active pandemic, is that if you suspect that you're testing a drug that works, it's keeping people alive who otherwise might die. If that's happening, it very quickly becomes a moral question of, crap, how long do we keep giving people the placebo if we might be able to save a lot of people by giving them the real drug? Now, we don't know that yet with remdesivir. My point is, in these RCTs, you very quickly will sometimes get an ethical dilemma when you get an efficacy signal when the drug seems to be working. Very important, and that's something that's going to have to be discussed. So this is how you do science, right? You don't go on national TV and say, hey, 36 people in France did well. Everybody, what do you have to lose? Maybe take remdesivir prophylactically, right? You don't go on Sean Hannity on his program and say, hey, a doctor is taking this and zinc prophylactically and he's doing great. This is how you actually do science, and I'm glad it's being done. Make sure you're following me on Rizzle using the link down in the video description. I post short blog updates. You can respond to me, and then I respond to you. It's a beautiful thing. Follow me on Rizzle, link right down below.